if we're going to have peace, a durable peace, which is Trump's stated goal, then there's going to have to be months of heavy pressure on the Kremlin. Sanctions, weapons to Ukraine, and making sure Ukraine gets all those frozen assets to sustain their economy for years to come. Do all those things over 8 or 10 months. Putin may begin to realize he's not going to be able to get any more Ukrainian territory. But you'll need an effort at least of that length and of that strength.
Hello and welcome to Independence Avenue Media. I'm Kartl Sharashenidze, and today I'm joined by former US Ambassador to Ukraine, John Herbst. We'll be discussing the ongoing peace process and what comes next for Ukraine. Well, Ambassador Herbst, first of all, thank you so much for your time. So let me start with Russia releasing video on Tuesday of what it said was the deployment of its nuclear-capable hypersonic Oreshnik missile system in Belarus.
Right.
Missiles that can reach much of Europe, right? So how do you read this move?
Look, this is a part of the Kabuki theater regarding Russia's desire not to say yes to the proposal that's coming from Trump after his conversations with Zelenskyy, and having an excuse that will not annoy Trump. So the dramatic footage of the Oreshnik is presented as a response to the alleged attack on Putin's residence, one of his many residences, one in Valdai, by Ukrainian drones, for which there is zero evidence, and there's some evidence that this is completely bogus. You've probably heard of SOTA, the SOTA project. Russian journalists would say they have people there, and there were no sounds in the night of air raid sirens or of missiles being launched to knock down incoming drones. And the Institute for the Study of War says also there's zero evidence. So Putin was going to say no to the Trump proposal, and he wanted to do it in a way that would not annoy Trump. And so they jiggered up this baloney about the attack on his residence, and they had to revise their negotiating position. And that's what this is all about.
Yeah, Ambassador Herbst, you mentioned the claim, Moscow's claim,
Yes.
Came right after the Trump-Zelenskyy meeting in Mar-a-Lago, right? So
Right.
do you think these kinds of claims and messaging from Moscow are effective with the Trump administration in this peace process?
I think the Russians are shouting with glee that Trump seems to have endorsed it. I say seems to because the language was not precise, but the language does support the notion that he had bought this nonsense.
Before this claim from Moscow, so what was your read of the Mar-a-Lago meeting? Like, did you see any positive signs?
Well, in terms of reaching a common U.S.-Ukrainian position, the answer is yes. Zelenskyy made a big concession, saying that he'd be willing to consider moving Ukrainian forces back from Western Donbass if there's this demilitarized zone established and Russian forces move also the same distance back from the current lines they occupy. And also that there'd be international peacekeepers there, not feckless troops under the UN authority, have to be something serious like European forces, and also security guarantee. And Trump made a significant concession. He's tried to avoid security guarantees, at least at the very beginning. That was one of the reasons why Trump got mad in the Oval Office in February. And while we've been negotiating on security guarantees since the European leaders came to the White House in the middle of August, not too much progress had been achieved on the U.S. side. Suddenly, though, major concessions from the White House. So I think the Russians were not too keen about all this. And that's why they dreamed up this phony attack.
Ambassador, you mentioned security guarantees, and President Zelenskyy says the U.S. is offering 15-year security guarantees. So what will make these guarantees more enforceable than the Budapest Memorandum, for example?
Well, the Budapest Memorandum offered assurances which are something not legally binding. If he's talking guarantees, that normally involves a legal commitment. And I think the administration has indicated that, not, I mean, the administration has indicated that this could be ratified by the Senate. And that also suggests something that it really is a guarantee. And if you have a commitment to respond in all ways, including militarily, if Moscow were to break a ceasefire, then in theory, they're committed to stopping the Russians. Now, no one I know of is talking about putting American soldiers right there, but that was never in play. But European soldiers there, the American Air Force backing up European soldiers, that could work.
Was it like a surprise for you to see these kinds of guarantees on the table?
Well, I think actually Ukraine giving up Western Donbass is a serious mistake because the Russians have been unable to conquer that area. But if they got an ironclad security guarantee from the United States in exchange, that could make it worth it. Although, why the U.S. would want to give a security guarantee when they're telling Ukraine to give up easily defensible positions is not necessarily, the answer to that is not quite clear.
I'm sorry, when we spoke last time in October, you described how President Trump would pressure the Russian president, then back off. Is this the same cycle? Has anything changed?
This continues. When did we speak in October?
End of the October after.
Okay. So at that point we had seen first, of course, the putting down of the sanctions on Rosneft and Lukoil, which was excellent, and then we saw the dispatch of Dmitriev to Witkoff in Florida. But by the time we were speaking, it wasn't quite clear how that was going to go, I believe. And we only realized when we learned about the 28-point plan, which came out of those talks between Dmitriev and Witkoff, we realized how bad they were. And so at that point, the Trump team was moving in the opposite direction of pressure on Russia. But of course, those 28 points were then pretty quickly thrown away when Rubio met with the Ukrainians in Geneva a few days after the Secretary of the Army, Driscoll, delivered the 28 points to Zelenskyy.
Yeah, and a very last question. So what outcome do you think is most likely at this point? What do you see?
Look, if Trump presents the plan, the document that the U.S. and Ukraine have worked on and asks for a Russian reaction, I consider that a positive. If he lets the Russians use this bogus story of the attack on Zelenskyy to change their position, say we can't accept it, then Trump is not moving closer to a peace deal. He's delaying a peace deal. And this is part of the pattern we've seen since he came into office in January. He heads in the right direction, but then he backs off. If we're going to have peace, a durable peace, which is Trump's stated goal, then there's going to have to be months of heavy pressure on the Kremlin. Sanctions, weapons to Ukraine, and making sure Ukraine gets all those frozen assets to sustain their economy for years to come. Do all those things over 8 or 10 months. Putin may begin to realize he's not going to be able to get any more Ukrainian territory. But you'll need an effort at least of that length and of that strength, but probably longer.
Yeah, very last question. You mentioned Donbass, and President Zelenskyy said it will take referendum to ask Ukrainian people what they think about. So what do you think about referendum? And there was also the conversation about presidential election, and we saw the argument that you cannot have elections when there is ongoing war in country. So what about referendum in this case?
Well, referendum, Zelenskyy mentioned that to the Trump team weeks ago, and they took that as his willingness to consider the issue of Western Donbass. And I think they were right to see it that way. And I think Zelensky's right to say if Ukraine's going to do that, the Ukrainian people have to decide, not he himself, for reasons of political legitimacy. But I don't think we're going to get to that point anytime soon, because the Russians, I think, do not want to have U.S. security guarantees ratified by the Senate in play.
Well, thank you so much again.
You're welcome. Bye-bye.